Hello everyone, so today I am here with Mr. Tank and we are actually going to be talking about anatomy. So anatomy is all of the inside pieces that make up our bodies and the horse's bodies. So we're going to talk about this today, and there's a couple reasons that anatomy is important to know with horses. First of all, knowing the different parts of the body will help you if your horse is ever sick or hurt and you need to call the vet. It'll help you to be able to understand what's actually happening and to tell your vet what's going on, because you'll know what the individual pieces are. And secondly, anatomy is good to know because in a couple weeks we're going to talk about conformation, which is how horses are built, how their inside structure works, and so that conformation really determines what kind of jobs horses can have. Some horses are good at jumping and some ones are not. So the anatomy piece will really help later on when we get into that conformation. Alright, so we're going to start off with his face. Now there's a couple things I'm not going to actually paint on his face just because it would be really hard to wash off. One of those things would be his ears. So horses have two ears, just like us. They use them for hearing. The horse's ears actually tell a lot about their body language. So the way he has his ears right now, being all droopy, that means he's relaxed. So the horse's ears actually really help us understand what they are thinking and what they're feeling. And because horses' ears are so flexible, there's actually no bones in there. So all of this is made of cartilage. It's very flexible. Another thing I'm not going to paint is his eyes, but again, he has two. They sit on the sides of his head more so than the front. Right here in the front, he actually can't see because his eyes are not facing forward, they're facing to the side. So on the front of his face, he has the forelock, which is the part of the mane that we can see right here. All of this hair in the front is part of our forelock. And horses use that, like we talked about in grooming. It can come down and cover their eyes and help to get the bugs out of their eyes. Alright, so then right along the front, all the way down here, this would be just called the face. But just like us, it's at the very front of the horse's head. Down here is his nostrils. He has two that he uses for smelling. You can see he also has lots of little whiskers that he uses for feeling. All of this whole area that has his lips, the nostrils, the whiskers, the whole thing is called the muzzle. He says, "Don't paint my muzzle." On the side over here, you can see we have this big, almost circle. That is technically called the jowl, but we'll call it the cheek. And his teeth actually go all the way back into this part of his head. They go really far back. And so this is a very muscular area. This is an area a horse uses when they're chewing. It's a big area along the side. Alright, so right behind his ears here, you can see there's a little bump. That is actually one of the bones in his skull, which we'll talk about the bones next week. But right behind there is called the poll. And so we're going to paint the poll. We are going to paint the poll green. Alright, so now we're on to the neck. There's a couple different pieces here. First of all, we have the mane. So all of this hair that grows, it's similar to our hair. He uses this, like the forelock, to swish and get the flies away. So we're going to do this red. So their mane goes all the way from our poll up there, all the way back down here to the withers. So they go a really long way, all the way down his neck. Alright, so then underneath the mane, we actually have this piece along here that goes with the mane. That is called the crest. And it's actually a muscular piece. It will be bigger in horses that are very fit, that they are exercised a lot and they're very healthy. Then we have this whole big area here that is called the neck. So you can see it starts smaller by his head and it gradually gets bigger back towards his body. So it's actually kind of like triangle shaped. You can see it's actually a triangle now. So we have thin up towards the head, gets wider the further out it goes. So we have a point here, and a point up there. So right along here, there's actually a line that you can see, and that is called the jugular groove. So underneath all of here is the horse's throat. That's where they breathe, that's where their food goes down. It's all mostly right along this line. We're gonna paint that teal. Here we have the withers. So technically the withers, you can see the mane comes down and it almost goes down here and it starts a little bump, and that bump goes all the way down into the horse's back. So this whole area here is our withers. And you'll see next week when we do the bones that that's actually a big piece of the vertebrae of the spine. The withers are really important. When a horse moves, it acts like a lever between the neck and the back. So it's an in-between piece that holds them together. All of this area here is called the shoulder. Just like us, how we have a shoulder. The difference is with people, ours would be horizontal. It stands up on our back sideways. On horses, it's very up and down. So you can see when you move your shoulder blades, it's going side to side, whereas horses, it goes up to down. But it's pretty much, other than that, the same piece. So we have our shoulder here, and now we are going to do this piece. So this is actually what would be the equivalent of this part of our arm. So it would be this whole upper arm piece. The biggest difference is that in people, we can move that piece around, and in horses, that piece is actually attached to their side. So it stays with their body. So next we have our elbow, which is just like our elbow, and you can actually feel it. His elbow is right about there. We're gonna paint that. He's showing us. You can see when he picks up his leg how the bone is actually back there. Alright, so now we have the forearm. So that would be this piece on us. And this is the first part that the horse actually can move, is their elbow and their forearm. They can move it away from their body. Alright, so now we have the knee. And this piece is a little bit tricky because we call it the knee, but technically it is not a knee. It's more like how our wrist would be. It has a bunch of little bones in there. And so most people will call it a knee. The technical term is called the carpus. This is the cannon. So this whole area from our knee that goes straight down until it gets bumpy again, that is the cannon. After that, once we get to the bony part, that is called the fetlock. Again, this is an area like the knee where it has a couple different bones there. Alright, so after our fetlock, it again becomes narrow and straight, and that area is called the pastern. after our pastern, you'll remember from our hoof class that we did, we have the coronary band and then it goes into the hoof. Alright, so I'm just finishing up the back here. So the back goes all the way from our withers back to where the last rib is. This is the area when you're riding a horse, that's where the saddle sits and that's where the rider sits. You do not want it to be further back past the rib cage. So after our back, then we have this area here that is called the loin. And you will learn more about that next week when we do the bones. This is actually the weakest part of the horse's back, which is why you would never want to have a saddle sitting back there. It's very easy to damage that area. Alright, so now we have this whole big area here, and this is called the barrel. Kind of because it looks like a barrel would be. It's long, round, it's kind of just barrel shaped. And all this area does is connect the front end to the back end, and it helps to hold all the organs inside. Alright, so there you can see we have the barrel done. That's a really big area of the horse's body. After that we have what's called the flank. And so you can actually see on horses they have this area here where the hair starts growing in different directions. So this hair actually grows back towards the barrel. And this area along here is called the flank. So we're going to paint that. Some horses are sensitive about being touched in this area. Tank is one of them. I think it's just kind of ticklish for them. It's not an area that has a lot of strong muscles, it's more squishy. And so I think it's just more sensitive. Alright, so now we have the hip. So technically, this little point here, you can actually feel it and kind of see it. It comes to a point. That is called the point of the hip. And on people, that would be kind of here, where you would think of your hip being. Technically, the actual hip joint, the part of the hip that moves, is way back here. And on people, that would be back in here, kind of in with your leg. So the hip is kind of a more complicated area, but for the most part, we call right up here the point of the hip. And when we get to conformation, this is a big area that helps determine how athletic a horse can be. The highest point of a horse's back here, is called the croup. And so the croup goes from the highest point back down towards our tail. So it's this kind of angular area there. We're going to paint that green. So after our croup, we have the dock. So the dock is the area right between where the tail and the croup meet. It's going to be right back there at the base of the tail. So all back here, this whole hind back area is called the haunch. So it's pretty much the equivalent of how our shoulder is at the front. This is an area that has a lot of different muscles. It's a very muscular piece. Alright, so now we have the stifle, which is technically right about in there. And that bone is actually the true knee of a horse. So even though this piece up at the front is called the knee, it doesn't move like a knee. The internal pieces are not the same. And so technically, the stifle is the true knee. This is also an area where horses commonly have a lot of issues. Just like people can have knee problems, horses can have stifle problems. Alright, so now we have this piece that is called the gaskin. So it's this whole round type of area that goes there. And this is actually a super muscular piece of the horse. If you feel it, it is very, very hard. Alright, so now we have the hock. And the hock is this big area back here. It also goes around the front. And it is similar to the carpus or knee up at the front, although the technical term for this is the tarsus. So we have the carpus in the front, the tarsus in the back. So just like how the front knee is equivalent to our wrist, this back one is equivalent to our ankle. So when a horse is standing, they're kind of like that with the ankle pointing upward. Alright, and then from there, the rest of the bones on the back are the same. So we have, again, our cannon. Alright, after our cannon, we have the fetlock. And then after our fetlock, we have the pastern, which then goes down to our coronary band and the hoof. Alright, so now we have Tank completely painted with all of the body parts. And remember, this is just the external or outside pieces of the body. This is just the names that we've given to everything that goes on the outside. There's a ton more stuff on the inside, and we're going to talk about that in the coming weeks. But for right now, we're going to lunge Tank. We're going to have him walk and trot around us, and that way we can see how this actually looks in motion. Walk.